Picture yourself on the deck of a merchant brig, 3 days out of Charleston, your hold packed with sugar and indigo worth more than you will earn in a lifetime. The afternoon is bright. The sea is empty. And then it is not. A shape has lifted over the southern horizon, low to the water, almost flat, with two masts that lean backward at an angle that looks wrong to your eye, as if the ship is already leaning into a wind you cannot yet feel. Your own ship is heavy and tall and proud. You carry 12 guns. You should not be afraid of anything that small. But you watch that lean shape, and you watch the distance between you shrink with a smoothness that turns your stomach, and somewhere in the back of your mind, a cold arithmetic begins. She is faster than you. She was always going to be faster than you. And there is nothing in the rigging above your head or the cargo beneath your feet that can change that single fact. That shape is a schooner. Those backward-raked masts and the long fore and aft sails strung between them are not decoration, and they are not an accident. They are the single most important change in the way human beings moved across water for 200 years. And for one violent stretch of history, they redrew the oldest line in seafaring, the line between the hunter and the hunted. Before this hull existed, a pirate was a man who got lucky with the wind. After it existed, a pirate was a man who chose his victims at leisure and ran down anything he wanted. So the question worth asking is not how piracy happened. Men have always stolen from other men. The question is how one shape of wood and canvas made the stealing so easy, so fast, and so nearly impossible to stop, and then how that exact same shape turned around and hunted the pirates to their graves. Before we sail any further into this, if you find yourself drawn to the strange machinery of history, the objects and inventions that quietly rewrote the world, take a moment to subscribe and let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I find something genuinely remarkable in the idea that we are all sitting in different harbors of the world, separated by oceans, looking back together at the same handful of ships. To understand the Predator, you first have to meet the people who built it, and almost none of them were thinking about murder. They were thinking about money, and about weather, and about getting home before the storm. The earliest stories point to the cold working harbors of New England in the first years of the 1700s. There is a much-loved tale set in Gloucester, Massachusetts, around the year 1713, in which a shipbuilder named Andrew Robinson launches a strange new two-masted vessel, and a man standing on the shore watches it skim across the water and calls out that she schoons, an old word for a flat stone skipping over a pond. Robinson, the story goes, liked the sound of it and the name stuck. It is a lovely story. It is also almost certainly not true. Serious students of ship design have dismissed it as a fireside fable, written down for the first time nearly 80 years after it supposedly happened. And the truth is that nobody can say with certainty who built the first one or where. The design seems to have grown slowly out of older Dutch and English boats, refined by working men in a dozen harbors who never wrote their names in any book. And that anonymity is the first important thing about the schooner. It was not invented in a palace or commissioned by a king. It was a workboat, hammered together by fishermen and pilots and small coastal traders who needed something quick and cheap and easy to handle with a tiny crew. Down in the Chesapeake Bay, the design found its sharpest expression because the geography demanded it. The bay is enormous and famously shallow, an average of around 20 feet deep, threaded with 24 narrow rivers, and a captain who wanted to move goods through that maze needed a boat with a thin keel that would not run aground and a rig that could thread the wind in tight water. The men of those Maryland and Virginia yards, especially the shipwrights around Fells Point in Baltimore, sharpened the hull into a deep V, raked the masts back hard, and stripped away weight until they had built something that could move at 11 or 12 knots, when the great ships of the age plodded along at 6. Nobody set out to build the perfect weapon. They set out to build something fast and cheap, and the weapon was simply what fast and cheap turned out to be in the wrong hands. To grasp why this mattered so much, you have to understand the one rule that governed every sailor's life for thousands of years, the rule of the wind. A sailing ship does not simply go where you point it. It goes where the wind allows, and the great square-rigged ships, the towering men-of-war and the fat merchantmen with their rows of square sails hung across the masts, were built to run before the wind, to be pushed from behind like a leaf down a river. With the wind at their back, they were magnificent. But ask them to sail toward the wind, to claw their way upwind into the very direction the air was coming from, and they became clumsy, slow, almost helpless, crabbing sideways and losing ground. The schooner broke that rule. Its sails did not hang across the ship from side to side. They ran lengthwise, fore and aft, along the line of the hull, and a fore and aft sail behaves less like a parachute catching the wind and more like the wing of a bird, generating a kind of lift that lets the boat slice at a sharp angle into the wind itself. A schooner could point far closer to the source of the wind than any square-rigged ship alive, and that single ability changed everything, because it meant a schooner could always escape in the one direction its enemy could not follow. Imagine being chased by something faster than you, and then discovering that you can simply turn and run uphill into the steepest part of the slope, where your pursuer's legs give out and yours do not. That was the schooner's gift. It did not just sail fast. It sailed fast in the direction that mattered, and it left the heavy hunters of the old world wallowing in its wake, pointed the wrong way, watching it go. Now put those two facts together, the speed and the windward edge, and you get the thing that made the schooner so terrible, which was not its guns but its patience. A pirate in a fast schooner did not have to ambush you. He did not have to get lucky. He could sit on the horizon for an entire day, a tiny pale triangle of sail just at the edge of sight, and study you the way a wolf studies a herd. This was the chase clock, and it was the cruelest clock ever invented at sea. He would note your heading and your speed and the set of your sails, and he would measure the gap. And then, when he was ready on his schedule and not yours, he would turn and close it. Out on the open water, it became a problem of pure arithmetic, and the math always ran against the merchantman. A heavily loaded trader might make 6 knots on a good day. The schooner made 11. Across an afternoon of open sea, that difference is not a footnote, it is a death sentence, the gap shrinking by 5 sea miles every hour, the pale triangle growing into a hull, the hull growing into a deck full of armed men. You could throw cargo overboard to lighten your ship. You could pray for a squall, for darkness, for a friendly sail on the horizon. You could try to point your own ship upwind and run for it, and that was the bitterest joke of all, because upwind was exactly where the schooner was strongest, and turning into the wind to escape only invited the predator to cut the corner and arrive sooner. The victim had 3 real choices, and only 3. Outrun a ship that could not be outrun. Fight a crew that had chosen this moment precisely because they liked their odds. Or strike the colors, surrender, and pray. Most chose to pray. Which brings us to the strangest weapon the schooner ever carried, which was its own reputation, and reputation costs nothing and spills no blood. By the height of the age, the silhouette of a low, fast, raked-mast schooner crossing the horizon had become a thing that emptied a merchant captain's courage before a single shot was fired. The crew of a trading vessel was small, a dozen men or so, hired to haul rope and trim sail, not to die for another man's cargo. They knew the arithmetic as well as anyone. They knew that the ship bearing down on them had been built for exactly this, that resistance would buy them nothing but a harder death, and that the men aboard her had every interest in a quick and bloodless surrender, because a fight damages the prize and the prize is the entire point. So the pirates learned to weaponize fear itself. They flew false colors to lure a victim close, then ran up something designed to terrify at the last moment. They closed fast and shouted promises of mercy for those who yielded and butchery for those who did not. And the schooner's very shape did half the work for them, because every merchant sailor in the Atlantic had heard the stories, had seen the empty drifting hulks, had a cousin or a shipmate who never came home from a run that crossed paths with a fast low sail. The terror was a system, as deliberate as the hull design. A surrendered ship is a profitable ship. A fought-over ship is a wreck full of dead men and ruined cargo. The schooner made surrender the rational choice, and a frightened crew that hands over its cargo without a fight is the most efficient business model piracy ever found. But speed and fear only explain how the schooner caught its prey. They do not explain why it was so maddeningly impossible to catch in return, and the answer to that was hidden where you could not see it, beneath the waterline, in the shape of the hull itself. The great Navy warships of the age were deep-bellied things. They needed that depth to carry their weight of guns and stores and to stand steady as gun platforms in a heavy sea, and that depth meant they drew a great deal of water, riding low with their keels reaching far down into the dark. The schooner, born in the shallow rivers of the Chesapeake, drew almost nothing. It skimmed. And so when the chase finally turned against a pirate, when a heavy frigate at last came over the horizon with 40 guns run out and the law on its side, the schooner simply did the one thing the frigate could not. It ran for the shallows. It fled into the maze of reefs and sandbars and mangrove creeks and tiny coral keys that fringe the Caribbean and the Gulf, into water 6 or 8 feet deep, where it slid across the bottom like a water bug and vanished up some nameless inlet. And the frigate, that magnificent floating fortress with its rows of guns, had to heave to and watch, because to follow into that water meant tearing her own keel out on a reef and leaving her stranded and helpless. The pirate's escape was not a trick of seamanship. It was built into the bottom of the boat, designed into the hull years earlier by some Chesapeake shipwright who only wanted to get up a shallow river. And now it meant that the most powerful warships in the world could chase a pirate right up to the edge of the shallows and then stop, like a hound pulling up at the edge of a cliff, watching its quarry trot away across ground it could never cross. It would be easy, hearing all this, to imagine the schooner as some invincible thing, but it was not, and its weakness is as important as its strength. The same obsession with speed that made it deadly made it fragile. To go that fast you have to be light, and to be light you give things up. You give up thick timbers and heavy armor. You give up the towering tiers of cannon. A pirate schooner carried a handful of guns, sometimes only a few, and a crew that was large for fighting but small compared to a true warship. It was a knife, not a hammer. It was built to frighten and to flee, to take soft prey and slip away, and it depended absolutely on never having to stand and fight something its own size or larger. Because when a schooner was cornered, when the wind died and trapped it, or when it was caught in open water by a ship it could not outrun and could not outpoint, the whole brilliant machine fell apart. Those thin, sleek hulls could not stand up to a broadside from a real warship. The light scattering of guns could not answer the iron weight of a frigate's gun deck. A schooner caught in a true fight was not a predator anymore. It was a fast animal run to ground, and the same lightness that had carried it away from 100 enemies now meant it could be torn open in a single exchange. The entire era of the pirate schooner rested on a hidden bargain, and the bargain was this: you may be the fastest thing on the sea, and the most feared and the most profitable, but you must never, ever be made to stand and fight. The moment the chase clock stopped, the moment the choosing was taken out of your hands, every advantage you owned turned to nothing. So why, if it was so fragile, did this design spread across the entire Atlantic world like a fever? The answer is money, the plainest and most powerful answer in all of history. The schooner was cheap. It was cheap to build, requiring far less timber and labor than a great ship, and it could be hammered out quickly in a small yard by ordinary craftsmen. It needed only a small crew to sail, which meant fewer wages and fewer mouths to feed and a larger share of every prize for every man aboard. And it was fast, which in a world of privateers and smugglers and blockade runners meant it could make money in ways no fat, slow merchantman ever could. The sharpest version of this ship, the famous Baltimore Clipper, was forged in exactly these economic fires. As war and embargo gripped the Atlantic in the late 1700s and early 1800s, the Chesapeake builders pushed their design to its limit, because a fast ship could run a blockade, outrun a naval patrol, and slip a cargo past an enemy who could see it but never catch it. During the War of 1812, these Baltimore-built schooners became legendary privateers, licensed by their government to prey on enemy shipping, and they were stunningly good at it. One of them, the Chasseur, commanded by a Baltimore captain named Thomas Boyle, grew so bold that he reportedly sent a notice to be posted in England itself, mockingly declaring the entire British coast under his personal blockade. Even the Royal Navy, the most powerful fleet on Earth, at first wanted little to do with the type, because the very sharpness that made it fast made it a poor and unsteady platform for heavy guns. But the same qualities that served the privateer and the smuggler served far darker trades. The shallow draft and the speed that let a ship slip up a hidden river also let it run human cargo past the patrols sent to stop the slave trade after it was outlawed, and the fast schooner became a favored tool of the slavers precisely because the law could not catch it. The terrible truth of the design is that it was morally blank. It was a tool that served whoever held the helm, the honest pilot and the patriot privateer and the smuggler and the slaver and the pirate alike. And the wealth it generated for all of them was exactly why the shape multiplied across the world faster than any law could follow. And here is the turn in the story, the moment the hunter became the hunted, and it is the most satisfying piece of the whole tale, because it grows out of one obvious and overlooked idea. For years the pirates of the Caribbean had run wild, taking ship after ship and vanishing into the shoal waters of Cuba and Puerto Rico whenever a warship appeared. The United States Navy first sent a squadron of heavy, deep-drafted ships to stop them, under an officer named James Biddle, and it failed almost completely for the simplest reason imaginable. The big ships could not follow the pirates into the shallows. They were the frigate at the edge of the cliff, watching the quarry trot away. Sending lumbering warships to catch shallow draft schooners was like sending heavy cavalry into a swamp, and the pirates, in their own fast schooners, simply laughed and slipped away up the next inlet. Then, late in 1822, command passed to a different kind of officer, a commodore named David Porter, and Porter understood the one thing his predecessor had not. To catch a schooner, you need a schooner. He did not ask for bigger guns or heavier ships. He went to the shipyards of Baltimore, the very birthplace of the type, and in early 1823 he bought 8 shallow-draft Chesapeake schooners, ships almost identical to the ones the pirates sailed, and he added a fleet of small oar-and-sail boats with biting insect names like mosquito and sandfly and galliniper and gnat, a flotilla the sailors christened the Mosquito Fleet. And then he took these light, fast, shoal-water ships down into the Caribbean and did to the pirates exactly what the pirates had been doing to everyone else. He chased them into the shallows. He followed them up the inlets and into the reefs and the mangrove creeks, into the very water that had always been their sanctuary, and he found that the sanctuary had vanished, because now the law sailed a ship that could go everywhere the outlaw could go. It worked with brutal efficiency. Porter's schooners, crewed by men whose names would echo later in American history, young officers like David Farragut and Lawrence Kearney, scoured the coasts of Cuba and Hispaniola and the Yucatan, searched every bay and key, escorted the merchant convoys through, and burned the pirate ships and the pirate camps wherever they found them. The freebooters who had terrorized the sea lanes suffered so badly that they all but gave up taking ships at all, retreating to raids on land where the Mosquito Fleet could not so easily reach them. The schooner had armed the pirate, and now the schooner disarmed him. The exact shape of hull that had built the golden age of piracy became the instrument that ended it. The weapon turned in the hand, as weapons so often do, and the predator discovered, far too late, that the thing it had counted on to make escape possible was now the thing arriving to cut off every escape. So we come back to where we began, to you standing on the deck of that merchant brig, watching the low-raked shape grow against the horizon, feeling that cold arithmetic settle into your chest. But you know more now than you did then. You know that the shape bearing down on you was not born in wickedness. It was born in the shallow rivers of the Chesapeake and the cold harbors of New England, in the minds of working men who only wanted a fast, cheap boat to carry fish and ferry pilots and beat a storm home. You know that it was the same shape, exactly the same shape, that flew the flag of the Patriot privateer and ran the slaver's cargo and hunted the pirate down in the end. The schooner was never good and never evil. It was something more unsettling than either. It was a multiplier of whatever intent its captain brought aboard. And that may be the truest lesson hidden in this old fast hull, a lesson that has nothing to do with the sea and everything to do with us. For a brief and violent stretch of years, the schooner did something the world had never seen. It made speed cheap. It put the fastest, most agile force on the water within reach of any man with a small fortune and a willing crew, and in doing so it briefly tore down the ancient monopoly that said only kings and empires with their towering ships could rule the trade routes. It changed who could be a predator. And then, just as suddenly, the same logic flowed the other way, and it changed who could be caught, because the moment the law learned to sail what the outlaw sailed, the outlaw had nowhere left to hide. Every powerful tool we have ever built has obeyed this same restless rule. It empowers whoever holds it first, and then it empowers whoever holds it next, and the advantage belongs to no one for very long. The fast ship arms the robber, and then it arms the sheriff, and the only thing that stays constant is the speed itself, indifferent, racing on, carrying whatever cargo of intent we choose to load aboard. The great age of sail is long gone now. The pirates are dead, the privateers are forgotten, the Mosquito fleet has rotted away to nothing. But the lean, raked silhouette of the schooner still cuts across the water at festivals and races, beautiful and harmless, a museum piece skimming a calm bay while tourists raise their cameras and admire the grace of it. They see an elegant antique. You see something else now. You see the shape that rewrote the oldest rule of the sea twice in a single lifetime. So I will leave the question with you because I would like to know what you think. When we invent a tool that hands sudden power to the few, the fast ship, the fast weapon, the fast machine of any age, is it the tool we should fear, or only ever the hand that holds it? Tell me down in the comments. And if you have enjoyed this voyage into the strange machinery of the past, leave a like and subscribe, because there are a great many more forgotten things waiting just beneath the surface, for anyone curious enough to go looking.